We're almost there. We're almost there. Good evening and welcome to Nurturing Our Roots live Zoom session with Antoinette and Karen, the show where history come alive, the journey from slavery to freedom. This is our discussion tonight. We're on every Tuesday night at 7 o'clock Central Standard Time. Tonight we have a topic that we want to talk about, something that many of us are facing this day, like our ancestors had to face during their time. So right now I'm going to turn it over to my co-host while I go and get everything set up for our segment tonight. Hi, Karen.
Hi, Antoinette. So good to see you.
Likewise, likewise. How are you today?
I'm wonderful, wonderful. I just wish we weren't living through such turbulent times, but we
No,
got to keep
I
our
know.
spirits up no matter what.
That's right. So I'm going to put myself on mute and go ahead and share it. In the meantime, you can just take over.
All righty. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Nurturing Our Roots. And tonight we're going to talk about some of the other instances in our past of racial violence, like we saw last week in our nation's capital. And it'll be an interesting discussion. And I want you to think about what were your ancestors doing during that time. As you do your research, are you seeing where your ancestors may have left their community and moved somewhere else? When you see them on one census record to the next, that they're in a totally different location, think about why they may have left. And you may want to do some research to find out what was going on in that area when your ancestors were last there. It may give you some clues as to the migration pattern for your family. So I think tonight is going to be an interesting discussion. And it's important to realize that, history has a way of repeating itself. When you don't know your history, it tends to repeat itself. So I think it's important for all of us to pay attention, not just to what's happening today, but also pay attention to and read up on the past. Because I don't know about you, but for some of what we're going to be talking about tonight, I did not learn it in school. I only learned it once I became an adult. And, our learning never stops, especially as family history researchers. We can't research our family without researching the history of the time. And so we're going to discuss some of that tonight.
Well, thank you, Karen. And the statement that you made that history has a way of repeating itself because it does. And it is family history that helped me to learn a lot about the local history where our ancestors once lived and still live. But what we see today is nothing new under the sun. When we think about communities like Rosewood, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and what it was that our ancestors had to face when they had to face a mob. It wasn't. It was a very difficult time, and I can't even imagine what they went through, sitting in there in their homes or trying to hide out in the woods and save the children, save the elderly people, because mobs of people decided to attack them. I have a couple of photographs that I do want to share with um, with our viewers tonight. Just give me a minute to pull it up. And Karen, when I think about uh, this election, the election have always brought some uncomfortable feelings for so many people. Now, this was in Opelousas. This photograph was taken, and it was a
Hmm.
massacre that definitely um, about voting. Look at the voting. You see the voting polls there, and it was
Yeah,
voting.
so you see these men lined up. You see one is a veteran, has his uniform on, lined up to vote.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And let's do another
Oh,
one.
wait, before you show the next one, and that last one, I was looking at the eyes of the white man who was looking at the vote. Like
Yes.
his eyes were very sinister, skeptical looking. Like,
Mhm.
why is he getting to vote?
Right, right. And here is another one. And all these images was taken off the internet as well. Look at this one. So it basically, now this is more in modern times.
Hmm.
More than 300,000 Negroes are denied the right to vote.
Hmm.
And so when we stop to think about our own family history and what does this have to do with our family history, it has a lot to do with our family history. Um, because if you're looking for your family members and you can't find them, this was the Elaine massacre, and this Red Summer took place.
Hmm.
Mhm. And so we have always faced mobs, and it was never, um, no matter how many times I watched the movie Rosewood, and I have watched it so many times, just that one lie that was told. And when you think about the movie, play the scene back, the sheriff knew that she was lying.
Now
Didn't
think about what you just said, Antoinette. That one lie,
that
and
one
the sheriff knew. What are we dealing with the insurrection of last week?
that
It
one
began
lie,
from a lie.
that one lie. And what I find is that people like that can know the truth, but the hatred is so deep that the lie become real to them.
That's
It's a
exactly.
psychological issue with people like that. You can know the truth, but you rather believe the lie, even when you know it's a lie. And so we go back and we look at Fanny, that movie with Rosewood, and how Fanny lied on the black men a black man in the town. She knows that it never happened. And the very people that she looked in their face every single day, even when the elderly woman was down on her knees, scrubbing the floor, she knew that she was about to lie. Someone had been there. And that one lie. And when um, Esther walked out on the porch and said, I raised most of you all.
Hmm.
And y'all know that he didn't do that. But people was killed behind that lie. A whole community was destroyed behind that lie.
And we've seen lies happen over and over again that caused the lives of our people throughout history. It's been about lies.
And innocent people, innocent white people who that didn't believe in that, it cost them as well. So uh, we are seeing history repeat itself, and we just don't know which way this can turn. And on that note, let's tie it into genealogy right now. If someone was looking for their family members and the whole family left through the night and didn't go back because of a mob of people, isn't that something?
And and we know it's happening because we can look at our records and see where our families, the whole family just left town. And
Right.
it's also how some families, how we lose track because it may have been, let's say, my whole household that just up and left town. but it's possible that my brother, who may have lived nearby, but maybe not in the exact same town, but nearby, his part of the family didn't leave town. But
Mm-hmm.
my household knew that we could never come back again.
Right.
And so generations after generations would pass, and the families never knew each other.
And they left with the clothes on their back through the night to escape with their lives, and everything that they worked hard for. If we go back and to think about another movie, Queen, when the former enslaved people received their freedom and they start walking and, living in the woods, the mob even came after them then,
Hmm.
you know.
What were they so afraid of, Antoinette? Why? Why did they have to do this to our people?
Well, I feel it's several things, but the loss of power, the very thing that we see right now, that's the one thing that most white people who share those views are afraid of losing power. That is a terrifying feeling to them because for the most part, they are afraid that what they have done to someone, they're afraid that it will be done to them.
And the thing is, we are a different kind of people because we never exact mob violence on them. Even when our ancestors were enslaved and there were more of them than there were of the slave owner, they rarely, and they had many opportunities to take it out. But they just weren't those kind of people.
Right. They was not those kind of people. And when we think about the hardship during Reconstruction, and I always say we're going through Reconstruction now. They just gave a time frame to end it in 1877 when the soldiers pulled out, but we're still in Reconstruction. Still gathering the pieces. Some families are still trying to buy their first home, own their first piece of land. Or seeing the first person in the family attend school,
Mm.
really, you know, people.
You mentioned school, and when I met the people who were at that insurrection last week, in my mind's eye, I could just see the mobs outside of William Frank School here in New Orleans
Oh,
uh,
yes.
when it was integrated. Or
Yeah.
outside, or when you look at lynchings, I see you have photos of a lynching. The mobs out at these lynchings. That's what those images last week remind me of. I mean, it felt almost if it was generational memory.
It could have been because, now if you look at a lot of these young, now you see the older men, but look at the faces of the very young men that was there. So,
Mm-hmm.
some of them forced their sons to take part of this. I was reading just today on the internet where this police officer, and I forgot the state and the county, he said, we got to go back to taking the ears off.
Mm,
And
mm,
what was the
mm.
first thing that they would do? They would cut off the ear or they would cut off the finger for a souvenir.
No, they
What?
would cut their tongue out.
Yes. I mean, I couldn't phantom that. I don't think any of us could. But to stand around and to take a picture, we see three people here to stand around and proudly take a picture
Mm-hmm.
with smiles on their face.
Posing
Repeat that again.
like last week, like last week, posing
Yeah,
for the camera.
yeah, posing for the camera, and I can only imagine what, and then again, I can't, what our ancestors went through, you know, when they was faced with those vicious mobs that set out to kill, bloodthirsty. They would turn on their own people. If their own people do not share the views that they share, they call them sellouts.
Mm-hmm.
And they turn on their own people. And
It's
you have to ask yourself, what kind of people is that? You know,
well, yeah, I actually I don't have myself that question, Antoinette. I know what kind of they are. Kind of people who left their homes in Europe, traveled across an ocean, and took over other people's land and claimed it as their own.
mhm,
It's the kind of people who also brought our ancestors from Africa and enslaved them and had them work for generations and generations for free. Kind of people these are. These are people who never got over the fact that they lost the war,
never. And
carrying what ancestors did.
mhm. And that
That
slogan,
go around their
the
blood, their veins.
mhm, that slogan that the South shall rise again,
Hmm.
that would be the slogan to the end of the earth, to the end of the world, you know. Um,
That's what they believe.
and if you look at this photograph, look at the police officers there, and look
Mhm.
how many police officers attend this
Mm.
massacre, this riot. And these are the same people who have the badges that Trayvon Martin and Sandra Bland, all those that was the lives that was taken, had to face those type of people, you know.
And some time ago, the FBI said that our police departments, our law enforcement departments, have been infiltrated by white supremacists.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that is the truth. Um, Karen, you know, we often hear people say in their genealogy research that family members do not like to talk about things that happen.
Mhm.
Um, you really have to get into genealogy to understand why they don't want to talk about it. Because there may be a family member that was lynched. They don't want to relive that night that that the mob came to their home.
That is true.
Yeah. And they want to forget that because it's opening up old wounds, you know. And I can understand it because after all, we're researching, we're reading research, we're listening to oral interviews of people talk about it. But those that actually had to live it, it's a nightmare.
But it is so important that the history we're living through now is passed forward because this is going to happen again.
It's happening
And
now.
we need to, most of the mob violence that has occurred in our history, I never learned about in school. I
Hmm.
only learned about it through my own research
Hmm.
or like the movie Rosewood.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
but I was never taught about what happened, the Black Wall Street
Hmm. Hmm.
in school. I certainly, I was never, growing up here in South Louisiana, I knew nothing about the Thibodeau massacre until a few years ago. I had no idea about it. You
Like
know,
you said earlier, it's not something you're going to find in your history books, the textbooks
mhm.
at all. You know, I think the powers that be, they don't want to face what their ancestors participated in. You know, um, it's the hidden truth. And genealogy is one of those subjects in studying your genealogy that will help you to reveal some of the atrocities and events that took place surrounding your family. You know, you get to see your family in the history of that place where your family lived.
And
And
it's painful. It's painful to come across information that would show you that maybe you had an ancestor or a relative who was lynched. It's
mhm,
definitely painful.
of course it is, you know. And women that was raped in the family, women who carried babies that they knew that wasn't for their husband, and their husband had to accept that child and love their child, knowing that the man would come to the house and put him out his own house and have his way with his wife or his daughter, you know.
Mhm.
And that's why genealogy is it's pretty challenging sometimes, you know. So what I did share the show into the if the chat room is open, if people want to just join us in for a
Yes,
conversation about what we are experiencing, what we're seeing now. Very uncomfortable.
it is. We don't have any questions so far.
Mhm.
But for those who are watching, if you have a question, please just type it into the chat box and I'll bring the question up on the screen.
Mhm.
Um, and if you have some instances in your own family history of where you discovered that a relative was affected by mob violence, racial mob violence in their town, let's talk about it.
Right.
Um, and in New Orleans in 1866, in the summer of 1866, there was and I shared a story on my Facebook page, but there was the New Orleans massacre, which is eerily similar to the insurrection that happened in DC last week.
Mhm.
This is after the emancipation, when what was then the Republican Party. Let me just explain this so nobody is confused first. The Republican Party of today is really the Democratic Party of the 1800s. And the Democratic Party of today uh, is one that fights for the rights of people of color and all people. Um, and so when I say it was the Republican Party that was seeking to, there was in New Orleans, there was to be a Louisiana state legislative constitutional convention so that they could get newly freed, formerly enslaved people the right to vote. And there was a parade on Canal Street with some of those newly freed, formerly enslaved people. They were marching in support of this constitutional convention. But the mayor at the time, a man by the name of John T. Monroe, he didn't like this happening at all. And all of a sudden, out in the crowd, shots rang out.
Wow.
And many believe it was the police that kicked this thing off. And at Mechanics Hall, uh, which is where the Roosevelt Hotel is in New Orleans right now, just off of Canal Street, that
Mhm.
was being used as a capitol. And some of the people who were marching ended up going in there, and the mob followed into Mechanics Hall, and a massacre occurred.
It
And
reminds me today.
and so it just reminds me so much
Mhm.
of last week. They did not want to see people have more rights. Our people have more rights. And they felt like this convention that was happening to give them more rights was illegal. Now, what did we hear about last week? That was an illegal, that Biden's win was illegal.
Yeah.
And so these folks believe that they have the right to exact mob violence out on you because things are not going the way they
They
believe
want them.
it to go. And and
And the
so
way they, because that privilege, that white privilege, I gotta have my way.
and I'll kill you. I will
Yeah.
kill you to get my way. So again, this is it's in our history. This is just one incident here in New Orleans. I am sure there are more
Look at
incidents all around
Carfax,
the country.
Louisiana.
Yes.
The massacre in Carfax, Red Summer, Rosewood, all across the United States, we can think about the massacres that has taken place. And it was mobs of people,
All
women
because they
and
didn't want to
men.
lose power.
You see, a lot of times people focus on the viciousness of the white men, but they never talked about too much about the white women. And even some of the slaveholder white women was very brutal in
Mhm.
slavery, very brutal in slavery, especially when they knew that their husband took one of the young girls for his concubine or his, somebody he slept with.
Mhm.
Those women was very vicious. There's one slave master. She cut off the head of the young girl because she was so beautiful.
Mm, mm, mm.
So somewhere that hatred is passed down from generation to generation. And it's a sadness to see that that seed is so deep rooted that I don't know what it would take to extract that thing out of there.
Well, we know we have to stay vigilant. And if nothing has shown us that we have to vote, I don't know what will. We have seen the power of our vote. The power of our vote will make these people lose their minds. But we have to stay strong. We have to always vote. We have to make sure our young people vote because we see what these folks will do if they ever get power again.
Well,
Our
they
lives
believe,
are in danger.
yes, they believe that the Civil War put them in impoverished conditions. They lost everything, including their chattel property. And that did not set well with many of them. So when a person is looking for their family history, a lot of times, if people go according to the census, they will start at 1940 and work their way back to 1870. But there's before and then there's prior to 1870, you know. So those are the cloudy zones for me. Working your way back, you know, from yourself to your father, your mother, their grandparents, their parents, and you will find that all of them fit in a time and a place where events took place.
And if you can't even find them on the 1870 census,
Mm-hmm.
go back and read those historical newspapers from the time of the emancipation until then to see what was happening in that area.
Yeah, and it's pretty hard, because when you read those old newspapers, Karen, you know, I read somewhere it was no, they would use the word nigger in the article.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, you know, um, some of the most degrading things that one could even imagine was put in those papers.
I
And
think about areas of our state and any state really that is still ruby red today.
hmm,
Think about what must have happened historically to keep it that way.
right, somebody was ran out of there, because we can say this in our own family. Robert and Alexander purchased 200 acres of land. There's no transaction of the land as if it never exists for them. Just that one sheet of paper.
Makes you wonder if they intentionally made sure it was not recorded in the court
It
record.
was recorded, but
Hmm.
that's it. You don't find where they sold it,
Hmm.
anything else. You don't find anything on it, you
Hmm.
know. Uh, So I guess we can say we're one of the blessed families that we didn't have to run and escape the areas where our ancestors lived. Um, they left East Feliciana, went over to St. Helena, and then Tangipahoa Parish. So it wasn't like they left and went into a whole different state. Like some people left Mississippi never to return.
So many left
You
Mississippi.
hear that all the time. You know, I was only 2 years old when my grandfather
And you froze up for a second. And I'm sure you'll be coming right back. But we do have a question from the chat room from Maya. She wanted to know what happened to
that
make
we.
it stay this way. I'm
Mhm.
sorry, you
That's
froze
okay.
up for a second.
Mhm. Yeah, so that's what we see. And in your quest for knowledge of your own family history, you just don't know what you're going to find. You just have no idea what you're about to sink your teeth into.
Well, you know, it makes me think about my Nelson relatives in Assumption Parish.
Hmm.
I Up to a certain point, I don't see any more evidence of them in Assumption Parish. Now, I know some of my great grandfather's brothers left the South, but I don't know
Hmm.
anything about the circumstances of why they left the South.
Hmm.
And it has only been through DNA, connecting with my DNA relatives, that I found out that one part of the family ended up in, I think, in Chicago.
And for every person that passed away, that person, there's a library that dies with that person. And although you have the DNA, but you don't have the stories to fill it in, someone that can at least share some oral history with you about what happened to your family, why did they leave. Here's another image that you see here. Um, the police with the guns and the black men just there.
And I'm trying
Um,
to those those look like World War I uniforms,
mhm,
like military. But I
mhm,
guess it could be a certain location's police department. But it reminds me of the World War I uniforms, and um,
mhm,
you
mhm.
know, they are there with those guns. And look at those guns.
Yeah, they look like some type of military guns, huh?
Yes, absolutely, and that's very intimidating. It was very intimidating.
Hmm.
Yeah, think about the fear that our people must have lived with.
Look at this
Just
child right here, how he's looking. You see?
he's looking like, ooh, look at him with that gun.
Hmm.
What's those pointy things on the end of that gun?
Hmm.
You know? And they knew they couldn't even begin to step out of line.
Oh, they knew it. You know, they knew it. They knew just if that's just like saying if that was BLM the other day, we would still be hearing about the bodies.
Because it would be a bloodbath.
Well, yes, it would have
They'd
been.
still be wiping our blood.
Look at this. This is in the Elaine riot. Look at that. Say it was okay for them to damage property, and just like today, the property that's damaged at the state capitol, the taxpayers got to bear the burden of rebuilding it.
So we have a couple of questions from Maya in the chat room. And so she was wanting to know, what happens to make things stay this way? That's one question. And the other one was, what is it that makes white people so
Yes, I
afraid?
do know the organizers should have had some insurance. Bottom line, you know, you organize, you get to get permits from somewhere. So, but they pass it on to us. And see, that's another thing too that we think about. Just if that would have been Black people there doing that, they would not only the ones that would be living to survive to tell a story about it, they'll be facing something very hard.
Mm-hmm.
They would have all types of liens on them to pay for the damages, you know. And the audacity that some of them had the audacity to urinate and to smear feces, like, how could you even imagine doing such a nasty, filthy thing
That's just a show of disrespect.
in every way? In
They want
every
to make sure you know that they came to disrespect you. So did you hear my question from Maya?
no.
So she has
Would
two
you repeat it
questions.
for me, please?
Yes. One, her first question was when we were talking about how some of these areas still remain ruby red today. She wants to know what happens to make it stay that way. And then her other question is, what is it that makes white people so afraid of us?
If you can, why don't you answer? Then I'll go behind you. What your thoughts is?
Well, it's about power. They want to make sure that they can hold power over who they presume to be the weaker person or the weaker people. And if they can maintain power, then they could also maintain financial superiority. That's what I think.
Well, I believe that some of them believe in that three-fifths of a human being, that we will destroy the neighborhood. They don't want their children going to school with any other person of color, and they ensure that these neighborhoods will stay ruby red. When you think about the real estate companies, some of them are even told not to allow any black people or any other people to stay in these communities, and they are afraid of power, losing the power. It goes back to power. You know, they're
Hmm.
afraid of that because when you think about a people who have built everything, basically, like I heard the man say the other day, this is our state capital. We built the state capital. I mean, we built the capital, right? No, you didn't. We built the capital. And everybody, but see, that's because the history is so distorted to them. It could be a lie, but they will take it over. Let me give you an example of how much it costs to build a house. And all those things that is a factor there.
And you froze for a minute, so we didn't hear anything. We didn't hear your
Okay.
example.
Yeah, they are afraid of the power, losing
Mhm.
power. And that's a very scary thing for them, to lose power and to have people of color or black people in control of anything.
And
Yes.
and they ought to know by now that these tactics don't work because we emerge from this stronger and stronger, um, and they don't.
Hatred never win.
Right,
It
right.
never. The bloodshed, those five people who lost their lives, they don't care. They see that as what it was, a sacrifice. When you went there, you knew it was a possibility that anything can happen. So that's no big deal to them. That person is a hero,
Hmm.
except the police officers. That person is a hero because, as far as they're concerned, that person put their life on the line for what they believe to be true. Like I said, they know it's a lie, but they're not going to turn back on that lie.
Right. Because they don't want to admit that they were wrong.
Right. And for some reason, feeling that they are the superior race, they're the superior people. It's if you keep teaching someone that for generations and generations, after a while, you know, it's so ingrained in that DNA that nothing that anybody else says is a difference. We're liars.
And the fact that they keep bringing up what they believe is the Confederate flag, it's not the actual Confederate flag, but they will still, uh, the fact that they would bring that flag into the nation's capital and say they're fighting and chant USA. I'm like, my brain can't really comprehend that because if you are about the USA, you would not be doing what you're doing to the capital of the USA. That's not being a patriot. Certainly bringing in a flag that is really a flag of white supremacy, bringing that flag that you think is the Confederate flag into the Capitol. It just kind of proves how ignorant you are.
You know, I thought about the Honorable late John Lewis when he said, "We won't go back." A lot of people today, young people, don't know what he's talking about when he said we won't go back. They don't know what he's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to talk about what is going back to. What is he talking about? He's talking about Jim Crow. He's talking about Jane Crow. He's talking about slavery. You know, you said it earlier, and it's been said for many decades. History has a way of repeating itself, and there is nothing new under the sun. I feel like we have let our guards down because we feel like we have some forms of freedom, just a little bit. And so we didn't have to learn about the lessons of our grandparents. Oh, that was a long time ago. Why do you keep on digging up all that old stuff? You hear that all the time, you know. And so this movement here is showing Black people everywhere. It's not over.
And I don't think it will ever be over. We always have to be mindful that it's going to keep rearing its ugly head. And that's why we have to make sure we teach our children. Teach our children not just about our family history, but about the history that our ancestors lived through during their time.
I have something else I want to share with you. Uh, let's see. I don't want to stretch it out too. All right, because if I stretch it too hard, we can't see. I was looking for the year, but I'm gonna see if I can open it up, open the year up, and see what year is that.
Oh, I'm trying to see.
No,
I
you
can
can't
see
see that.
Wednesday, November something.
Uh-huh. I'm gonna see if I can reduce it down. It's so tiny. Let's see. But look at it. Another riot. You see, and 8 known to be dead.
Hmm. Wow.
That's July Perry, strung from limb of a tree and shot
Hmm.
to death early hours this morning. Negroes armed showed fight and 8 was killed. You see that?
Hmm. Mm-mm. My goodness.
So this is definitely nothing new under the sun as far as riots. We have always. And there was some white people would warn Black people that look, they're gonna riot tonight. You're
Mm-hmm.
riding tonight, you know. I've heard people in interviews that I talked to, they call them the night riders.
Yeah.
That's how May described them, the night riders. And they would come 50, 60 on horses, you know. riding through the night.
And that shows you their cowardice. You know, they ride through the night, hide in their faces, because at the other time they were supposedly upstanding members of the community. And again, that brings me back to last week. There were people who were doctors, lawyers, elected officials, police officers, you
Business
know,
owners.
business owners, otherwise known as upstanding members of the community, but they were there participating in an insurrection. Now, some of them hid their faces, but the vast majority did not. You know why? Because they felt like they didn't have to hide.
That's
They thought they had their man. They were going to go get the election secured for their man. And so they didn't have to hide last week.
and even when he lied so many times when he said, I'll be with you. I'll be there with you. He never showed up with him. He incited that ride and he know that he got away with it. He know that he got away with that.
From the chat room, Erwin asked, is this the lost cause in 2021?
We have yet to see, huh?
It's feeling like the lost cause, just as the Civil War was, is considered the lost cause. But we'll see how it plays out. We'll see. But it's definitely feeling like the lost cause. We'll see how many people jump ship in this next couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm. 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 We will see. Because I read this a couple of months ago, and this saying said when it came for the black folks, you didn't say anything. When it came for the Mexicans, you didn't say anything. When it came for the Indians, you didn't say anything. When they went after the gays, you didn't say anything. What make you think you're not next?
Mm-hmm.
You see, and that's what I see right now. Silence, because all the police that has been getting away with murdering people of color, black people of color, especially black folks, because that's who most of the murders are. Nothing was done when the same lawmakers could have did something about that. You see, and for each time they know that they can do this and get away with it, it was just giving them more power to feel like, okay, they're not gonna do us anything. We can do this. This one got away with it. This one got away with it. And so they felt like no matter what we do, we're privileged.
Right.
The law is on our side because we are the law. We have lawmakers there. They
They're
had
our
lawmakers
lawmakers.
open the door to let them in.
Let them in.
Let them in.
It was so plain to see. I was
Yeah,
watching it. I'm like, I've been in that building. I know what you got to go through to get in that building. They didn't go
exactly.
through that.
And the fact that they said that they asked for federal help 6 times and it was denied. 6 times.
Because they had their man at the top.
They had it planned.
And this is why elections have consequences. We have to make sure you get the right people with good character into elected positions, because someone with good moral character would never have denied sending help 6 times, knowing what was coming. It was a lie when they said, oh, who could predict this? We didn't know what was coming.
It was a lie.
FBI always knows.
It was a lie when Emmett Till was murdered.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lie. It was a lie when so many of young black folks was murdered. It was a lie. But they didn't care that it was a lie. They would take it and make it look like the other person, they're the victim. So we're not seeing anything new at all. At all.
What I want people who are watching this to do is to just take some time out and just write down your thoughts about what happened last week. and make sure that is left with your family history information
and,
because
and talk about it with the young people in the family, just talk about,
absolutely.
find out what they feel, what their thoughts about this, because this is something new in their time,
And it
um
is important. Don't let them just watch TV and play with their toys and
mhm,
not share with them what is going on because they're living through this too, whether they know it or not. But it would be terrible for them to grow up and then look back on this and say, "Wait a minute, how come I don't know that happened?"
exactly. Let's use Rosewood for example. Look at all the children that had to go into the swamps, and it
Mhm.
was the children that grew up in their 90s that was talking about what happened in Rosewood, you know,
Yeah, because
and
they gotta carry that history forward.
those children experienced it. They had to run from it. They were scared for their lives. I remember, and I experienced this in my lifetime. I remember when I was living in New Orleans, and the cable company came out to the house, and they said, well, look, you have to get um, permission from your landlord to drill a hole for the cable. I say, I'm the owner. The first thing he said to me, he said, I work every day and I don't own a house like this. I said, you know what? I want you out of here right now. I don't want to get the cable. And when I heard, yeah,
Oh my goodness,
that's
that
in my
breaks it.
lifetime. In my lifetime. And
Wow.
when I heard when the guy that was sitting on the porch and said, and he got a piano. Hell, he living better than me.
Mm, mm, mm.
Speaking about Rosewood again. So they sit there and they look at how black folks still excel coming out those cotton fields, coming out the tobacco fields. And they was determined. And the families worked together, collectively together. They didn't spoil their children with material things and not teach them the truth. They had to know at any given time, they had to run out the house in the woods or go under the house. They knew that. But now we stopped talking about it because we felt like between the period of Jim Crow and the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, nothing was going on. So, what are y'all talking about? That stuff is gone. And here it is again.
Yep. And it will keep coming back if we don't make sure that we utilize the power that we have.
So,
We have the power.
So if I had to say, after learning everything that I've learned through genealogy, yes, I understand some people may not want to research their family history because it's too painful, but at the same time, you can't ignore it. You got to confront the pain.
And for people who think, well, my family didn't really, we were successful, this, that, and the other. It was some of the most successful people who had to fight off these night riders the most.
That was the ones.
Hmm.
That was the
They
ones.
didn't want to see them with success.
No, and they certainly didn't want them living in their communities, going to school with their children.
Hmm.
There was times that even when Dr. King said, I feel like I led my people into a burning house.
Hmm.
But even although when we tried to separate the house, they was on one side of the track, we was on the other side of the track. But the dollar was circulating in the community, in the black community, that the white folks on the other side of the track, they were suffering because the dollar wasn't leaving.
Hmm.
The seamstress was on the other side of the track. The best cooks was on the other side of the tracks. Um, the blacksmiths was on the other side of the tracks. Everybody, the carpenters was on the other side of the tracks. So all of that skilled labor was on the other side of the tracks.
Yeah,
And they very seldom had to go on the other side.
because they
Co-
had what they need.
Coffee, sugar, that's, just about it.
Yeah.
And so they got together and said, boys, we hurting, and, take a shot of liquor, and the sheriff would make him a deputy. That's right. Let's
mm,
burn it down.
mm, mm, mm.
So you see, we couldn't win. No matter how we tried, we couldn't win. We couldn't win if we stayed separated, and we couldn't win if we integrated.
But through it all, we managed to survive because we're here. Our
Yes.
people never stop. Our people never stop reaching for excellence, you know, and we can't stop as we go forward. Because, in my lifetime, I think this is probably the worst incident of hatred that I have experienced, even though I'm experiencing it through television.
Mhm.
I've never seen anything that I could equate with this in my lifetime. I know it has happened in my ancestors' lifetime.
You know that for a fact
Right.
because, history is documented to tell us, what they went through. But once again, I just hope that people do not become so discouraged that they do not want to research their own family history and talk about the history of their own family members. That's sort
Actually, I hope this will make them want to do it even more so.
of, hmm I think so. It made me think about Charles Daggs, and he was a Republican, and they had threatened him, um, and told him that he better not run for office. And that's how Daggs ended up not running for office.
Hmm.
And in Tangipahoa Parish here in Ponchatoula, Louisiana, Arthur Tasker was the first and only Black man that ever was elected to become the mayor in Ponchatoula,
Hmm.
the strawberry capital. You know, and there's a lot of preachers. They wasn't just packing Bibles; they was packing guns in their church because they don't know when they was going to ride up in the church and you know um, just be angry behind voting and asking people to get out and vote. You know,
Hmm.
urging people, come on, you got to go and vote. That's where the power is at.
And the fact that, taking it back to last week's insurrection, the fact that Stacey Abrams was able to bring out that vote in Georgia.
Woman, yeah. Well, there was quite a few, but she was a
Right. Right.
she,
Right.
yeah,
She didn't do it alone. We know that, you
right.
know.
But she was a
Um,
brave woman. She reminds me of Fannie Lou Hamer, the
right.
spirit of Fannie Lou Hamer,
She didn't take her loss and just go and sulk about it. She decided she was going to do something even better.
because she know what they did to her. You know.
And so it was the fact that all these additional people were on the voting rolls
Mm-hmm.
and that turned Georgia red, that contributed to the election, to Trump losing the election. And his people just, they can't, they could not accept that.
Right.
So it comes down to the vote. It comes down to voting power. And our ancestors went through it, and now this generation is going through it. Our ancestors saw what their voting power could be, because after the emancipation, during the period of Reconstruction, they began to be elected to various positions within their local communities, and
Mm-hmm.
even at the state level.
Mm-hmm.
They saw the value of their vote, but so did the white mobs.
Mm-hmm. And they was afraid of losing that power. So once again, before we close out tonight, this is all a part of genealogy because when you're researching your family history, you don't know where you will find your family and what they was doing and how they contribute to many causes right in their own community, you know. But nobody's going to talk about them. Nobody's going to celebrate them like we should be celebrating our own family history and
And
those
writing their stories and telling their stories.
and telling their stories. It's our story. It's our history. It's our legacy. So close us out, my dear cousin and co-host.
Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us. Thank you, everybody in the chat room. And we will see you next Tuesday, every Tuesday, here on Nurturing Our Roots on YouTube. Please comment down below. Subscribe to our channel if you have not already subscribed, and hit the notification bell so that you won't miss any of our shows. We look forward to seeing you next week, and follow us on our Facebook page as well, Nurturing Our Roots on Facebook. Thank you all, and good night.
Good night, Karen. Thanks everyone